Welcome back, everybody. So it's 20 minutes before 8 here on this program, and this week's second investment conference is an initiative to ignite economic activity, restore investor confidence, prevent further job losses, and create employment. In his letter from the President's desk, Cyril Ramaphosa has also stated the potential to raise South Africans' standard of living. He's called for greater efforts to build an economy that can benefit all South Africans. To discuss this further, we have the Minister of Trade and Industry, who was meant to be with us. He unfortunately not with us this morning, but we've got Business Unity South Africa, or Busa, board member Stavros Nicolaou, who's in the Johannesburg studio with us, and in Cape Town, Matthew Parks, the Cosatu Parliamentary Coordinator. Good to have both of you. Thanks so much for joining us here on the program.
Thanks for having us, Len.
Absolute pleasure. Matthew, thank you very much. Nice to see you there in Cape Town.
Sure. Good morning.
So, Matthew, let's begin with you. What do you think of the second investment summit that's about to take place this week?
Cosatu, we welcome it. It's a fantastic initiative. We have long raised concerns about a domestic investment strike, and at Cosatu, our most important concern is the unemployment crisis that is hitting workers very hard. We have 40% unemployment, thousands being retrenched. We have 400,000 new job seekers entering the economy every year, and we have 1% economic growth. So investment is critical to defeating unemployment, to growing the economy. We're quite pleased that the President and the Minister organized the Investment Summit last year, where we've already seen 250 billion rand of new investments coming in, the largest investment inflow in 5 years, according to the Reserve Bank. We are hopeful government will exceed that this year and meet its 1.2 trillion rand target within 4 years. So this is fantastic news. But look, I think as Cosatu, we also want to warn business and investors that whilst we welcome the investments, workers are not slaves. They must be paid a living wage. We want workers to be given decent permanent jobs. We want to see all workers employed and not simply profits at all costs. But having said that, this is a fantastic moment. And I think we can even mention now that the President this morning is opening a new automotive manufacturing hub in Pretoria, which should create 5,000 new jobs. So this is really good news. As Cosatu, we're also working very closely with government, with the Department of Trade and Industry, the Presidency, on 14 sectoral master plans for 14 key sectors of the economy. And this is the kind of action we expect from government about working with business and labor to create jobs, to grow the economy, to make sure all South Africans are employed.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, these are really the kind of things that we need to see happening. So, Stavros, from business perspective, Business Unity, again, let's talk to what happened last year. So we saw 300 billion being pledged. I think to date 160 billion rand is sort of, now we're seeing it actually coming to fruition. How successful was last year's conference? Let's go back a year.
So look, firstly, Leanne, let me say that Business Unity South Africa, Busa, welcomes this initiative by the President. I think it's very timely given the medium-term budget policy statement and the downward revision of our growth forecast for this year down to 0.5%, which is significantly lower than our population growth. So we welcome the initiative. How successful was last year? I think if you look at the target that the President and his team set, it was roughly 1.2 trillion rand over 5 years. 280 billion achieved in the first year. So if you were looking at this on a run rate basis, ahead of target. But for us, it's not so much about the targets. It's about attracting investment into the country so that we can balance our fiscal position as a country. So on the one hand, we've got mountains of debt that we've got to manage, and on the other hand, we've got low growth rates. And this certainly will assist in terms of pushing up the growth rates in the medium to long term. So unlocking investment is critical, and I think that this initiative by the President, certainly the second conference, will assist in that growth trajectory, we believe.
Yeah.
It's also noteworthy to mention that last year, 2018, South Africa attracted the highest foreign direct investment of any African country. That hasn't been the case for many years. We know we've had a difficult, challenging 10 years, so it's certainly noteworthy and it's certainly welcome that we attracted the highest level of foreign direct investment last year. Of course, as business, what we would like to see is we would like to see more new investment rather than maintenance investment, if we can call it that, coming to the fore, because that's what's going to stimulate our economy. It's very much needed at this point in time.
And that's what a big concern of people is that the investment that companies are pledging is not necessarily new investment, that the investment is more towards expansion or the maintenance of companies, and it's not that new investment and money being pumped into the country, but it's from companies that are already here, and it's a necessary spend for them. And that's, I think, where a lot of people are saying, and they're becoming a bit skeptical, saying, okay, these companies are pledging, but they were going to spend it anyway, they had to.
You know, Leanne, we analysed that, and there was certainly a mix in the first investment conference. So there were a number of new investments. I know the company I'm with, Aspen Pharmacare, for example, that was a 4 billion rand new investment in anaesthetic manufacture, what we call small volume parenteral. So we looked at it, and there was certainly a mix of both. And that's encouraging. So it wasn't just maintenance and expansion, there were new investments. Of course, we'll have to see what happens in the next 2 days.
Indeed.
But I think what's important for business unity, what's important is that we create confidence to attract investors, both domestic and foreign investors, into our economy.
Yeah.
I think we are starting to slightly turn the corner from a confidence building and a sentiment point of view. So some of the reform enhancing measures that the president is embarking on, I think, are starting to show some green shoots, and that's critical in terms of building confidence. You know, capital will follow confidence. And I think that's the important thing, is that these initiatives do build some confidence.
So let's talk to confidence. And Matthews, I'll bring you into this one, and perhaps you can give us, from the union's point of view, we talk that we need confidence in South Africa. However, we saw what Moody's perspective of us and their outlook for us. They're very concerned about the economy. We saw that from our medium-term budget that the economy is not going to grow at what we initially thought at February, which was by 1.5%. Now it's gone down to 0.5%. We're seeing the tough position that South Africa is in. Which company would really want to invest money into South Africa when we are not looking good on paper?
Yes, look, I mean, we're in a very, very tough situation. Workers are extremely demoralized and despondent when you've got 40% unemployment, retrenchments, and so on. But no one is going to fix South Africa for us. We have to fix it ourselves. The Investment Summit is a very useful launching pad for that. We have seen some positive green shoots in the recent while. You will have seen last week the president opened a new cell phone manufacturing, the first one in Durban. We've opened new car manufacturing plants in Richards Bay and Pretoria and Port Elizabeth. There's been some good news on the job front, though we're seeing a lot of workers being retrenched, but the IDC has managed to save 53,000 jobs. The CCMA has managed to save 9,500 jobs. Those are the kind of green shoots we want to see. As Cosatu, we worked very closely with business and government to save EdCon early this year, where 140,000 jobs were at stake. So we have to lead from the front. It has to be domestic investors who lead, because that's how you attract international investment. Moody's gave us a very useful wake-up call on Friday. In fact, they were generous to us. They've given us 3 months to get our act together. We have to do that, otherwise we're going to be in serious trouble down the road, much more trouble than we are right now. But we can do it. We've got no choice. It's going to be a difficult fight, but we can do it. We're now meeting with the president, captains of industry, ministers on a monthly basis at NEDAC. One by one, we're unblocking the blockages to growing the economy and so on. Yesterday, the Minister of Trade and Industry unveiled a new one-portal stop for companies to register in 1 day, not the current 40 days. So those are the kind of practical interventions we need to have at place. We had a useful commitment yesterday from the Minister of Higher Education to engage with Labour and government and business at NEDLAC around the critical skills vacancies, around overhauling the CETAs and the colleges' curriculum to make sure it's linked to the needs of workers and the economy. So it's tough work, but as long as we can show some progress, we can give hope to workers, we can give hope to investors and get things moving as a nation. But we have no choice but to put our shoulder to the wheel and to get things moving.
I mean, that is the reality, is that we have no choice. But, there's so many people that are sitting waiting for things to happen. For instance, we look at the unemployment rate here in South Africa, and I know Matthew's obviously being from the Labour side, that's a big concern for you. Many speak to 30%, others speak to even bigger than that 30% number that we're looking at. And yet we have these investment summits. We talk about large amounts of money and investment, and yet it doesn't seem to be getting better for people on the ground. And Stavros, I'll ask you here from the business perspective, how do we make people's lives better? How do we translate or to make this investment that's being promised? And I'm sure we're going to get a lot of promises being brought forth over the next couple of days. But how do we make these work for South Africans?
So, Leanne, I think firstly what we need to do as a country, and I was in the same meeting as Matthew yesterday with the President. He's committed to, the President and his team actually were there yesterday. He's committed to the first Monday of every month, a meeting with business, labour and civil society to look at various, if I can call them, disenablers in the economy. And how we handle those disenablers and remove the obstacles to growth. So those are positive developments, I think, which we haven't had for some time in our country. Matthew's quite right. We have to make the country work. No one's going to make it work for us. So some of the things that we have to focus on is South Africa as an investment destination. Whilst there might be some negatives that people are raising, let's also have a look at some of the compelling cases why one should invest in South Africa, because that will respond to the question that you've asked me. I think we have a very a deep and well-structured financial services sector, which is critical for any investor. I think we have a very diversified economy. We have institutions that are independent, such as the judiciary, and various other institutions that have held our democracy firm. We're starting to see the restructuring of SARS. These are all positive developments that will assist the man on the street, the woman on the street at the end of the day. These are the type of institutions that are going to start making a difference. These institutions have been hollowed out, and I think we're busy rebuilding them as a country. That in itself will start translating to benefit on the ground, because we have to, as a country, do two things. We've got to reduce our debt levels, and there I think our government and generally as South Africa, we have to be a lot bolder around how we're going to reduce our debt levels, and then we have to get on a growth trajectory. Investment summits or conferences such as the ones that will take place over the next 2 days are critical in terms of getting growth back on track.
Yeah.
We cannot continue growing at 0.5%. We should be a 3% plus growth economy, and we certainly have all the potential to do that. It's really up to us, as Matthew said, to unlock that potential, draw in the investment, both domestic and foreign.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that we've been speaking to this for years and years and years about this growth that South Africa should be seeing between 3 and 5%. We never ever get there. Then we just keep on revising it downwards, and we're making a lower investment something. I mean, we're only forecasting 1.7% growth rate by 2022. And I mean, if you look back a couple of years ago, we were aiming for 5%. Yeah. It's a very worrying trend. But Matthews, I mean, if you're part of all of these discussions, which you are, who honestly has the appetite to invest in South Africa right now? What kind of companies would say, you know what, let's go to South Africa? And when I say let's go to South Africa, we're having trouble with electricity. Our state-owned entities are not looking good. Our debt levels are exceptionally high. Water is a big concern in the country right now. Crime, violence, doing business here is a difficult thing. Who in your view, from Cosatu, from the union side, are those companies that want to say, you know what, put all of that aside, we see hope in South Africa?
Look, I don't think we must also undersell South Africa. I think we need to be patriotic. South Africa is not the only country with problems in Africa or the world. We also have a huge potential. We have a very diversified economy, significant infrastructure. We have workers who are keen and willing to work. We have a special South African spirit, just as we saw in the World Cup rugby on Saturday. We can make things happen. We've done it before. Maybe at times we're a little bit lazy. We need a kick to get things moving, but we can do it. There's huge opportunities. We're well placed as the entry point to the continent for investors and so on. But we can do it ourselves. Government set a target to export cars of 350,000 this year. We exceeded that. We produced 385,000. We're now well on track to meet the target of 600,000 and 1.2 million. The clothing industry was bleeding jobs 20 years ago. It's stabilized now. It's growing jobs. And we're very confident that in the clothing industry, we can create 120,000 jobs. Agriculture, we see some growth and opportunities. But look, we have much more potential. And we would want to see the investment summit not only investing in existing well-established companies in the stock market, but actually creating new opportunities in new sectors. In renewable energy, we want to build local solar panels locally. We want to see us creating an electric vehicle industry. We should be investing in water conservation and recycling, in tourism. There's huge opportunities. There's massive opportunities to create thousands of jobs in industrial and consumer recycling, in agricultural land rehabilitation, in mineral exploration. Don't forget, we're the leading mining country in the world. But it requires business to be patriotic. We can't have a banking sector where the CEOs get paid 150,000 rand every day, cashiers get paid 325 rand a day, yet the big four banks have retrenched 2,000 workers each in the past few years. We would want to see banks be more like Capitec, for example, without selling their name, who's actually committed to creating 600 new jobs. We want to see companies playing their contribution by driving local procurement. So we're very pleased that the Minister of Finance last week announced he's going to table the local procurement bill, because that's how we're going to industrialize the economy and create jobs in South Africa. So it really involves all of us getting together. And as Stavros is saying, government also has to get its act together. We can't afford to collapse the SOEs. We can't afford to lose 10% of our budget to wasteful expenditure, to corruption, and so on. And I think what will also attract investors is to see those who have looted the state in Eskom being placed in orange overalls and being sent off to prison, the stolen assets confiscated. We would also want to see SARS come to the party. Currently, only 5% of import containers at our ports and harbors are inspected by customs. That has to go to 100%, because we can't invest in the local manufacturing industry, yet at the same time we allow all these illegal imports to come and collapse them to the back door. So really it's requiring a multi-pronged approach, but we are confident that as government and business and labor we can do it. Yeah. And maybe to give you kind of one positive example, when I mentioned the clothing industry was on its knees not so long ago, it's been revived partly and specifically because of a partnership between labor, as Cosatu, industry and government to kind of deal with the blockages, to work together, to complement each other, because we're all in the same ship together. So we will sink or we will swim together.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, Matthews, I think you're giving us some positive food for thought. And, you know, as much as we can always look, but we need to look at reality. We do need to bring into the reality and then find the solutions of how to get through all of this, which I'm very, very happy to hear that some industries are turning around and there is this investment that's taking place. I mean, we saw also the announcement yesterday of former Cabinet Ministers Jeff Radebe, Derek Honeycomb and Elizabeth Tebete named as special envoys on investment. Sort of many people are saying, are these the best we can do for the job? Do we not have new blood to come forward and pick up this and say, you know, they can bring in investment? Why do we need to keep on rehashing the same names and same faces? But again, that's where I say there is that balanced view coming forward. Your views on this? Do you think something like this is a good idea? This will help?
So, look, Leanne, I think we need a multi-pronged approach. And I think what's encouraging for me is the singular focus we have got around attracting investment. Because there are the various envoys, there's an economic advisory panel the president's put together. So there are various measures that are coming to the fore. What's important for me is that we're starting to get a singular focus on attracting investment. And it's got to be investment in sectors that we have a comparative advantage in, such as tourism, certain manufacturing, certain sectors in manufacturing hold a lot of potential for our country. Agri-processing, agribusiness, these are the sectors that I believe if we get investment in, we do have a comparative advantage, and we can then use that to stimulate and grow the economy. So I think we are starting to turn the corner, Leanne. I'm starting to get a positive sentiment. It's very positive for me, Matthew, yesterday was the meeting that we had at NEDLAC. It's, as I said, the first Monday of every month. We haven't seen those levels of commitment to meet on a frequent basis and to actually feedback on what happened at the last meeting. Because often, you know, you talk with government and then 6 months later nothing's happened. I'm starting to get a sense in these meetings that the blockages are being unblocked. The portal that Matthew mentioned yesterday, the one-stop shop portal, where you can register a business from A to Z, basically. That is a positive step in the right direction, and that tells me that government are starting to listen, because business, labour also for years has lamented that the ease of doing business in South Africa ranks very lowly, global scale.
Indeed.
We needed to do certain things like registering a business in a couple of hours. So yesterday's announcement by Minister Patel is certainly a positive development. It demonstrates to me that government is listening. They are starting to get serious around some of these disenablers.
Well, this is a good development, and we just hope that there's a lot of positivity that comes out of the next 2 days. The President's second investment summit is about to take place, starting this evening, and then of course business kicks off tomorrow and the next day, and we're hoping for all of this investment to come into South Africa and translate into jobs. Stavros Nicolaou, thanks very much for talking to us. Stavros is a board member of Busa, and of course Cosatu's Parliamentary Coordinator, Matthew Parks, in our Cape Town studios. Thank you again for being with us here on the programme. That is our